Outputting the data in a list as we're doing it here is nice, but it would also be nice to have some styling on those list items. And therefore, that's what I want to do next. Of course, feel free to also pause the video here and practice this on your own. Apply some styling, any styling of your choice, to these individual list items, and then compare your solution to mine to see how I styled this. Now here's what I will do. I will create a new object that keeps or that holds the styles for those list items, and I'll name it goal item. The name is up to you though, here in this style sheet object. And then in this object, which defines the styles for this identifier, you can set up any styles you want. And I'll give every goal item a little bit of margin, for example, so that we have some spacing around it. Maybe 8 pixels. I also want to add a border radius here so that we have rounded corners. And this also wants a value that's defined as a number. And here I'll set this to 6 pixels. Now to make sure that we can see this radius, I will give this a background color so that this item has an overall background color of a specific hex code that I prepared ahead of time, which is 5E0ACC, which is a nice purple color. I also want to have some padding in here, so I'll actually add it next to the margin, not because it's required, but to keep those related values together. And I'll add a padding of, let's say, 8 pixels as well, so that we have some inner spacing as well. And last but not least, I also want to add a color here, and I'll set this to white, and this will be the text color. So again, you see the property names are pretty similar to what you know from CSS. We of course have this camel casing instead of using dashes, because dashes are not supported in JavaScript. But besides that, the names should look familiar. Now we can assign this goal item style to our text items here. So here we can add the style prop and set this equal to styles.goitem. And I'll reformat this to make it a bit easier to read. With that, if we save this updates and we see our items here. What you will see is that we got this changed styling, but actually on iOS, the rounded corners are missing. We only have them on Android. Now, why are they missing here? And what can we do to fix the styling there as well? This is a good time to talk about the differences between the two platforms. The idea behind React Native is that you can write code with React that will actually give you native mobile apps for multiple target platforms. So you don't need to write different code to target different platforms, but one and the same code base can get you there. Now, this is generally true, but as you will also learn later in the course, sometimes there are differences. And sometimes you need to make tiny code adjustments to target all platforms in the right way. And for example, here we got a difference. The rounded corners are missing on iOS because we added our styling here that applies the rounded corners directly on this text component. Now it turns out that this text component is translated by React Native to a fitting native widget, a native UI element. And the element to which it is translated, in case of Android, seems to be an element where corners can be rounded. But in case of iOS, it looks like the underlying native text output element does not support rounded corners. And that's why border radius has no effect on the text elements on iOS. Now, to work around that, we can wrap our text here in a view. So in this more generic container element. This is also translated to a fitting underlying element, and it turns out that the underlying element to which view is compiled by React Native is an element that supports rounded corners on both platforms. How do I know that? From the official docs and experience, and I'm explaining it to you in this course so that you don't have to find it out the hard way. So what we can do now is we can grab our style assignment here and add this on this view, and also add the key here on this view, because now the view is the main element that's output here in the list. The text now is a nested element. We still need the text because we still have some text to output, and as you learned before, text must go between text tags. But the styling is now applied to the more versatile view element. If we do that and we save everything, we now see the rounded corners on iOS as well. What we also see though is that the text is no longer white. Now we still have the color white setting here, but this is part of the goal item, which now is actually assigned to this view here, not to the text. And unlike in CSS for the web, the styles don't cascade. That's another important learning here. We do have this CSS-like property language here, if you want to call it like that, these CSS-like property names, but it's not CSS, it never was. So therefore, core CSS characteristics, like the cascading nature of CSS, where child elements and descendant elements inherit styles from parent and ancestor elements, is not part of React Native's styling approach. We don't have style inheritance here. So if we assign a text color to the view, this does not affect this text, or the text inside these text tags to be precise, because that's a totally standalone element. It is not related to this view, it does not inherit any styles from that view. So setting the text color on this view does nothing to the text inside that text element. Therefore, what we need to do is add another style object here, the goal text. That sounds like a fitting name. And we set our text color on that and remove it from goal item on the view. We could leave it there, but it doesn't have any effect anyways. With that, we now set our text color here. And now we can add this goal text style to this text here. So we add the style prop and set this equal to styles.goalText. And with this, if we save this now, we now have the white text back and we have the rounded corners. And this is really important. This is something you must understand about styling and about targeting different platforms. The general idea is that you have one code base that targets both platforms. But still there are differences under the hood. And some differences can simply be solved like this by adding an extra wrapper. Later in the course, you will also learn that sometimes you need to write totally different code for different platforms. And you will learn how that works as well. And you also learned that styling is a bit different than in the browser. It looks like CSS, at least a bit, but there is no inheritance and no cascading going on. That's why you really have to set the styles on the elements where they are supported instead of some global parent element. Just as the rounded corners couldn't be applied to the text color applied to this view didn't have any effect to the internal text here. We need to set that on the appropriate text element. And these are these tiny details which you will see over and over again throughout this course and which are super important when you're working with React Native. But with this, we now got the look we want here. And hence, we can now move on and dive a bit deeper into how we can and should output lists like this.